But my ideas actually crystallized when I started reading Sri Aurobindo. When I read The Foundations of Indian Culture, that completely shifted the way in which I thought about the revival and Renaissance in India. But I will also tell you that I was very surprised at that point in time when I read the first chapter of that book. Is India civilized? And I began to think, what sort of question is this? We have never talked about this. We have always thought that we have been civilized, we are civilized, and we will become even more civilized. But why is Sri Aurobindo stating this question at the very beginning? Of course, I was not familiar with what the West has written on India. And the West has written voluminously on India, particularly during the colonial period, when it was described savage and uncivilized from as many vantage points as possible. Of course, Sri Aurobindo refers to the works of William Archer in that particular book. I was even more surprised when I read History of British India by James Mill. This is a 3-volume work which was published in 1817. After 9 years of his association with the East India Company. East India Company had hired him for that particular work. Interestingly, James Mill wrote History of India without visiting India. And in that particular book, there is one section of the Hindus. There are 7 chapters in that particular book. And in those 7 chapters, he has taken every measure to show that India is savage and uncivilized. Now, of course, this book was written in 1817. Sri Aurobindo wrote a response on a topic like this in 1917 or so. Why are we talking about this today? The reason why we are talking about this today is that this narrative is still operational, and I'm not exaggerating this when I'm saying this to you. Binu mentioned that I have written this work titled Making Children Hindu-Phobic. This is a critical analysis of the topics covered on India and Hinduism for grade 6 by a publisher, McGraw-Hill. When you will go through the description, what you will find that it is just a politically correct version of the politically incorrect things that were written on India and Hinduism during the colonial period. So the only shift that has happened is that this narrative has become politically correct. But the core of that description hasn't shifted. It still remains the same. Still, Hinduism and India is seen through the prism of caste. And when we talk about caste, oppression and hierarchy follow. They are natural corollary or consequence of that description. So what happens? India and the traditions of India are hierarchical and oppressive. And this is the narrative which is unfolded, and this is put into the minds of the children grade 6 onwards. And as they grow older, they are only fed the sophisticated version of this narrative. So what I mean to say is that what begins at grade school, it continues through college and graduate studies. This is the reality. Again, I am not exaggerating. I am coming to this from a very scientific perspective after having done the work, after having read a lot of literature, and understanding that this malaise that Sri Aurobindo has spoken about, that hasn't really disappeared. It continues. And my understanding is that as long as this malaise will continue, the Renaissance of India will not happen. Or the Renaissance or revival of India will get massively impeded. In order for that Renaissance to happen, it is important that people are taught what India really has been and what are the possibilities that India can unfold for itself and for humanity in the future. This is what Sri Aurobindo's focus has been. The conflation of thought and the participation of a civilization and comity of nations are entwined. If you will look into history, you will find that good, wonderful universities have preceded the rise of civilizations. Look at what happened in Europe, 11th, 12th century onwards. There was scholastic movement. Different universities in all the imperial nations were established. These universities went from strength to strength for about 350, 400 years. And these civilizations, in whatever way, we may not agree with their ways, but they expanded themselves, they unfolded themselves. Similar is the case with the United States of America. Harvard was founded in 1600s. Many of the Ivy League institutions were founded in 1700s. In a span of about 350 years, you see the United States becoming a world power. Conversely, when you look at Indian history, most of the universities in India, they were destroyed at the close of the 12th century CE. And the impact has been that India is still reeling under the impact of colonization. It hasn't relieved itself. It hasn't manifested its full potential. Now, of course, as practitioners of this yoga, we know that mind is not a good instrument for truth. In fact, it is a bad instrument of truth. Sri Aurobindo and the mother have talked about this on many different occasions. The ultimate truths of existence cannot be found through mind. On the contrary, it can only be found after transcending the mind, after going beyond the mind and finding unity and union with the divine. But we must remember that this yoga is a world participating yoga. And because it is a world participating yoga, we need our mind to manifest the truth that we have experienced after going beyond the mind. Mind becomes extremely important from that perspective. From that perspective, it also becomes important that we nurture the mind, we nurture thought. And this is the power of the thought that we have to unleash on this civilization. In a powerful way, but in a way that it uplifts the consciousness of the people, uplifts the consciousness of the students.